She ordered the lobster like she did it every Tuesday, tossed her designer bag onto the table like it needed its own seat. Then, when the waitress reached out with the menu, she smiled and said, "Don't touch that. It's worth more than your salary." There's awkward, there's arrogant, and then there's this. I wish I could say it was a one-time thing, but the truth is, that moment cracked something open, something bigger than a bad dinner. It wasn't just about a rude comment. It was about power, money, and how some people mistake cruelty for class. This isn't a story about a bad date. It's about the quiet red flags we excuse in the name of love, the way charm can hide control, and how one sentence over dinner made me rethink everything. By the end of this story, you'll know why that night changed the way I see relationships and respect. Everyone's got that story, the one where the mask slipped and the truth walked in. If you've lived it, share it with us, anonymously, through the pinned link in the comments. For every 1,000 views, we donate $1 to support people rebuilding after emotional harm. Your story matters. Let's make it count. She had that effortless rich girl vibe, the kind of woman who wore perfume that probably had a silent X somewhere in the name. She picked the restaurant. She ordered the most expensive thing on the menu without blinking. And I was just happy to be there, some guy in a clean shirt trying not to pronounce gnocchi wrong. To be fair, our first few dates were fun. She was witty, generous, had this magnetic energy, like she knew she belonged to a bigger world, and maybe, if I was lucky, I'd get to orbit it. That night, though, something shifted. We sat down, the lighting was soft, the mood relaxed. Our waitress came over, middle-aged, a little tired around the eyes, but warm. She handed out the menus like she'd done 1,000 times before. And that's when my date said it, with a smile so sweet it made the words sting even more. "Don't touch that. It's worth more than your salary." I froze. The waitress blinked. My heart did this weird little hiccup like it wasn't sure whether to laugh or walk out. She didn't say it to be funny. She said it like she was stating the weather, like belittling someone was casual, normal, expected. And that was the moment I realized something important. You can learn a lot about someone by how they treat people who can't do anything for them. It's easy to be kind to your date when you're sipping wine and sharing desserts, but the way someone speaks to the staff, that's the real resume. That sentence, tossed out like a joke, wasn't about the bag. It was about power, about putting someone in their place just because she could. And I started to wonder, was I next? It's wild how fast one sentence can turn a date into a lesson, because sometimes the first red flag doesn't wave, it whispers. There's an unspoken rule in dating that's more reliable than any horoscope, red flag list, or TikTok coach. Watch how they treat the waiter. Not the CEO, not the influencer at the next table, the person refilling their water when they think no one's watching. Because manners aren't just manners, they're X-rays, and in one dinner, they'll show you more than 6 months of sweet texts ever could. When she said that line about the waitress's salary, I laughed, but not out loud. It was one of those nervous, internal chuckles that hides in your chest when you realize you might be sitting across from someone you don't actually know. What struck me wasn't just the sentence, it was the way she said it with pride, like diminishing someone else somehow raised her value. I've heard people try to brush this off before. Maybe she was having a bad day, or maybe she didn't mean it like that. But here's the thing, kindness isn't something you turn on and off depending on who's watching. Being decent to people in service jobs isn't above and beyond, it's the floor, the absolute minimum. You're not dating someone for how they treat you when things are easy. You're dating someone for how they treat everyone else, especially those they owe nothing to. I once had a friend go on a date with a guy who gave the valet a $2 tip, then turned to her and said, "He's lucky to get anything." They didn't go on a second date, not because of the money, because of the mindset. See, it's not about tipping big. It's about respecting people's time, their labor, their dignity. It's about understanding that there's no such thing as just a waitress or just a janitor. Every role is human. And if someone needs to step on others to feel taller, they're not growing, they're just compensating. That night, I didn't say anything. I just nodded, half embarrassed, half shocked. But something quietly cracked open. A little voice whispered, "If this is how she talks to strangers, what happens when the sparkle wears off?" I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just a bad moment. It was a preview. And the next chapter? It taught me why money, age, and power don't always equal love. When I told my mom I was dating a 36-year-old, she paused. The kind of pause where you know she's choosing between screaming or sarcasm. She took a breath, sipped her tea, and said, "So, are you dating someone or did you just sign up for a subscription?" She wasn't wrong. I was 21, fresh out of college, still figuring out what health insurance deductible meant. She, on the other hand, had a driver. She didn't just have her life together, she had someone on payroll to organize it. At first, the age gap felt exciting. It felt like a fast track to a better life. But over time, something shifted. Little things, quiet things, the kind that don't show up on highlight reels. She'd say things like, "I know you love that little restaurant, but let's go somewhere a bit more refined." Or, "You don't really need to worry about paying, I've got it." Every time I reached for the check, she'd brush me off like I was playing grown up. And slowly, my opinion started shrinking. I stopped suggesting places to go. I hesitated before speaking up. Because when someone funds the date, the ride, even your clothes, it becomes hard to say no. Power imbalance doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in the form of generosity. And the most dangerous kind of control is the kind that makes you feel grateful for being controlled. Looking back, I realized how easy it is to mistake being taken care of for being cared about. There's a difference. One comes with love, the other comes with quiet expectations and the price tag you don't notice until you're already paying. Was she kind? Often. Was she charming? Absolutely. But I was still 21. And in a way, I was a project, something to polish, upgrade, and show off, not a partner, a product. It didn't feel like a relationship. It felt like I was always being hosted. And the more I tried to bring my world into hers, the more it felt like I didn't belong. What started as mentorship in heels slowly became management in disguise. And the moment I realized just how deep the imbalance went was when my mom walked into that restaurant. You ever have one of those moments where time slows down? Like your brain suddenly decides to show you every red flag you missed on a projector screen the size of your guilt. That was me. Sitting in a restaurant, watching my date belittle the woman who'd spent her life making sure I had clean socks, tuition money, and confidence I didn't always earn. And it hit me. Not like lightning, more like a stomach drop. The waitress with the kind smile, the one who was just trying to do her job, was my mom. And the girl I was seeing just told her that her bag was worth more than her salary. I couldn't even swallow. My heart did that weird, fluttery panic thing like it was trying to jump out and apologize on my behalf. I looked at my mom. She didn't flinch, didn't get defensive, just nodded politely like she'd heard worse. And honestly, she probably had. My girlfriend didn't recognize her. Why would she? My mom wasn't in pearls or holding a casserole. She was working. Now, my mom's not the dramatic type. She doesn't do scenes. But later that night, we got the talk. Let me recreate it for you. Living room, dim light. Mom sipping chamomile like it's truth serum. Me, 21, emotionally wrecked, sitting on a beanbag I'd owned since high school. Mom: so, that's her. Me: yeah. Mom: she always talked to strangers like she's auditioning for a Bond villain. Me: I think she was just nervous. Mom: she made me nervous. Nervous I might throw breadsticks at her. Me: please don't. Mom: wasn't gonna. Too stale. Wouldn't make impact. I laughed, but underneath the banter, I could feel the question she didn't ask. Is this the kind of love you think you deserve? That moment broke something open, because suddenly I wasn't just dating a woman with expensive tastes. I was dating someone who had no idea how much kindness costs and how much value it holds. It taught me something I didn't expect to learn over dinner. If someone can't respect the people who made you who you are, they'll never truly respect you either. It wasn't about pride. It was about recognition. My mom wasn't just a waitress that night. She was a mirror, and my girlfriend failed the reflection test. After that dinner, I waited for her to say something. Anything. A text, a voice note, even just a half-hearted oops. What I got instead was a monologue. She called the next day, and without even asking how my mom was, she launched into damage control, with herself as the victim. I just felt judged, she said. Your mom was staring at me. It made me uncomfortable. She should have said she was your mom. I would have acted differently. And my personal favorite? Are you really going to let one awkward comment ruin something this good? In that moment, I wasn't hearing regret. I was hearing a masterclass in reframing reality. She didn't apologize. She defended. She minimized. She redirected the spotlight away from her behavior and onto everyone else's reactions. That's not a misstep. That's gaslighting. Gaslighting doesn't always look like screaming or manipulation in movies. Most of the time, it's subtle. It's when someone rewrites the script of what just happened, just enough to make you question your memory. It's when you end up apologizing for their mistake. And in contrast, respectful conflict sounds very different. It sounds like, I didn't mean to hurt your mom. That wasn't okay. It sounds like, can we talk about what happened? I want to understand how you feel. It's grounded, it's soft, and it takes responsibility even when it stings. What she did wasn't that. She turned the moment into a test of my loyalty. Was I on her side, or was I taking my mom's? Spoiler, it shouldn't have been a side at all. This wasn't a war, it was a wound. One that didn't need defending, just healing. But healing doesn't happen in relationships where accountability is seen as a threat, where being wrong is more terrifying than being unkind. That was the moment I realized. She wasn't looking for a partner. She was looking for a mirror that didn't talk back. There's a fine line between being spoiled and being silenced with shiny things. And for a while, I couldn't tell which side I was on. She bought me things, nice things, designer watches, curated outfits, weekends at places I couldn't even pronounce. At first, I thought it was love, and maybe a part of it was, but love doesn't usually come with this many receipts. It started subtly. She'd say things like, "Don't worry about paying, I've got it," or "Let me upgrade your phone, yours is embarrassing," said with a laugh, a kiss, a swipe of the Amex. But somewhere along the way, every gift came with a quiet message. You owe me. Not in words, but in tone, in expectations, in the pause she made when I disagreed with her. in the way she'd say, "After everything I've done for you," whenever I stood my ground. That's the trick about emotional control wrapped in luxury. It doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like comfort. Until you realize you haven't made a single decision in weeks. You've just been reacting, grateful, accommodating, softening your edges so you can keep receiving instead of risking. People talk a lot about sugar babies, but this wasn't transactional. It was emotional. She didn't want a partner. She wanted devotion, the kind you earn not with kindness or growth, but with glitter and guilt. And I kept wondering, was I still in love with her? Or just afraid of what it would mean if I said no? It's a strange kind of prison, the kind lined with soft pillows and first-class flights, where you're well-fed, well-dressed, and emotionally underfed. And you don't realize you're a hostage until someone calls it out, someone like your mom, or your own reflection. Because true love doesn't buy you, it sees you. And if you can't say no without fearing the reaction, you're not being loved, you're being managed. After everything I just told you, you'd think no one could top my story. But then I talked to Leela. And let's just say, if there were awards for most chaotic first impression with future in-laws, she'd be giving an acceptance speech. So here's how it went down, according to her. Leela had been dating her boyfriend for about 6 months. Things were going great. He was kind, attentive, had the kind of laugh that made you believe in summer again. And then came the invite, dinner with his mom, at her house, on a Sunday, with roast chicken, a sacred ritual, apparently. Leela, nervous but determined to impress, brought wine, wore a polite floral dress, Googled how to be charming without trying too hard. She was ready. What she didn't know? His mom had a very specific system. Plates had to match, seating had emotional subtext, and under no circumstances could anyone touch the gravy before the toast. So naturally, Leela, trying to be helpful, grabbed the gravy boat before the toast, which triggered a chain reaction. His mom gasped, the spoon slipped, the gravy boat flew, and landed gracefully, gloriously, right in the center of a white lace tablecloth, a family heirloom passed down through generations of deeply judgmental women. Silence. Forks mid-air. Leela tried to dab at the stain with a napkin, which only made it worse. His mom muttered, "It's fine," which we all know is code for, "You will never be accepted." And then, because fate is petty, Leela sneezed into the breadbasket. She told me the story laughing until she cried, because sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you just fail spectacularly. But here's the twist. Her boyfriend's mom eventually loved her. Not because she was perfect, but because she showed up the next week with new linens and zero shame. Sometimes it's not about making the best first impression, it's about making a real one that says, I might mess up, but I care enough to come back and try again. So here's the million-dollar question. Is one bad dinner enough to end a relationship? It sounds dramatic, right? Breaking up over appetizers? Walking away because someone was rude over ravioli? But let's take a closer look. Dinner isn't just about food. It's a microcosm of everything that will eventually define your relationship. How they treat others, how they respond to discomfort, whether they say thank you to the waiter or treat gratitude like a performance for Instagram. I had friends who said, maybe she just had a rough night. People say dumb things when they're nervous. Are you really going to dump someone over one comment? But it wasn't just a comment. It was a clue, a preview of what she thought about people like my mom, people like me. It made me wonder, if she thought kindness was conditional, what else in our relationship came with invisible terms? And look, not every awkward dinner is a deal breaker. Sometimes someone spills a drink, says the wrong thing, drops a fork down their shirt. That's not a red flag. That's just being human. But there's a difference between clumsy and cruel, between nervous laughter and weaponized arrogance. We forgive mistakes. We don't excuse disrespect. Because what happens at that dinner table, where there's no audience, no curated lighting, no story filter, is often who someone really is when no one's watching. One of my friends once dated a guy who refused to tip unless the server smiled first. She stayed with him for 8 months. It ended with her realizing she'd stopped smiling too. So no, the dinner wasn't the whole problem, but it revealed the problem. And sometimes one small moment is enough because it's not actually small. It's the quiet test of whether someone's love is rooted in respect. And if the answer is no, you don't owe them dessert. There's a moment, quiet, unremarkable on the surface, when everything clicks. For me, it wasn't a breakup text or a dramatic argument. It was a dinner. With one cruel comment, one tight smile, and one woman who didn't flinch. That night taught me something I wish I'd known earlier. People show you who they are when they think no one's watching. And if someone needs to make others feel small, especially someone you love, someone who raised you, just to feel tall themselves, you don't need to keep standing beside them. We talked about age gaps and power plays, emotional manipulation dressed as generosity, the difference between being cared for and being quietly controlled. We laughed through horror stories of dinner fails and tried to untangle the line between a bad moment and a bad pattern. But here's the truth I took with me. Love isn't proven by how someone treats you when things are perfect. It's proven in how they treat people who can't offer them anything in return. The server, the valet, your mother. So no, don't date someone who makes your world feel smaller just so they can take up more space in it. Don't date someone who needs to put your mother down to feel tall. Have you ever seen someone's true face right there at the dinner table? Share your story with us anonymously through the pinned link in the comments. For every 1,000 views, we'll donate $1 to support people rebuilding after emotional harm. Because your story isn't just yours. It might be the mirror someone else needs. And hey, if heartbreak turned into a lesson, it's worth sharing. We've got more stories coming, more voices to hear, more dinners to unpack. So stick around. You don't want to miss the next seat at the table.